Afghanistan. We're joined now for perspective on this by Major General Paul Vallely, United States Army retired, currently chairman of Stand Up America. Once again, General Vallely is Skyping in with us today on America's Forum. Paul, we thank you very much for the time.
Good morning, JD, John.
Paul, what can you tell us? What have you heard about the incident there in Afghanistan?
Well, this is what we call an inside the wire infiltration, JD. It's outside the wire or inside the wire. That's how they look at it. But when you look back several years ago, when they turned over the vetting and the clearance provisions to the Karzai government, that meant they had to clear all the Afghan soldiers and civilians who would be, for example, inside the wire, inside conference centers, inside the training facility academy where General Green was assassinated. So they don't do a good job from what I understand, and they don't do a proper vetting job like the United States would do. So the security's not as good as it should be, and we can't take it lightly that these were not going to occur with frequency as we go on here, because part of the tactics of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda is to infiltrate, just like they did Hassan there at Fort Hood, Texas. They infiltrate the forces.
General Vallely, if you were on duty today in that situation in Afghanistan and you had to lead men and you had to respond to this situation, if you were on the ground there right now, what would you be doing in terms of priorities?
The first thing I would do is assign American security, whether they be military, police, or special operations forces, for all facilities that have American personnel and ISAF forces in there. Now, I would make sure that that is number one, and not depend on the Karzai government and the Afghan forces to secure a facility where we have American forces.
So you want to keep it in the hands of Americans. The challenge always, General, in these kinds of operations, you're trying to build trust, you're trying to build
Sure.
armed forces there in Afghanistan, and we have met with difficulties before. As you reflect on this and we think of the loss of this two-star, what went on with General Green, I know the Army's a big organization. Did you ever have any interaction with General Green? What did you hear about him?
No, I do not know him, JD, at all, but evidently he's got a very distinguished career, and he was visiting that training facility, which is called the Sandhurst in the Sand over there. It's run by the British. So you had the British also responsible for security there as part of the ISAF forces. But I did not know him, but he evidently was just out there on a visit, and this is what happens inside the wire when you have infiltration going on. You can't prevent it 100%, JD, but certainly if I'm in charge, I'm going to make sure my forces secure my facility if I'm there, and I would think the same thing of the British.
Paul, we're going to ask you to stay with us. We're also going to bring in now another guest, Bob McCarty, an investigative reporter and author who wrote a book about green on blue attacks and how to spot them. The name of this book, The Clapper Memo. He dedicates the first two chapters to dealing with polygraphs and how they may not help spot people who could go on to attack U.S. soldiers. Bob, we thank you for your input this morning. First, let's get your perspective on this incident as it transpired last night. What's your take based on what you've heard?
Well, I see it as a continuing saga. You know, it really began back when they started keeping records the 1st of January in 2008. And these green on blue attacks, we've had the 88 attacks since then. The biggest year is 2012. And 143 dead, 181 wounded among coalition forces. The general is just the latest. And the thing that got me started on my book had to do with the DOD deploying what they called portable polygraph machines to the war zones in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now that was in 2008 when they did it. In 2009, a year later, I checked with the Pentagon to see how those devices work. The acronym for them is called PCAS. And they couldn't tell me. It took them 30 days to get answers back to me. And so that led to me trying to find out what really worked. And I found out there's another technology that should be working and should be used, and in fact has been used. But thanks to a memo signed by General Clapper, who's now the top intel chief of our government, it's forbidden for use within DOD.
Well, it sounds like you've got a governmental squabble right there, Bob, and turf battles and other interests at work. You heard Paul say if he were in command today, he would have American forces conducting the scrutiny and checking out the Afghans who came into the camp, of course, with people who can translate. Is that the biggest thing we need to do over and above technology?
Well, the first thing, I agree with the general. Americans need to be in charge, because right now they have an 8-step vetting process that the Afghans use. If you believe that this process works, I've got some land I'll sell you in lakefront property in Arizona. Anyway.
Yeah, we've got beachfront property in Yuma. I know what you're saying there. Now, there's another story, and this may be a reach, but it's on a lot of people's minds. Bo Bergdahl is sitting down with lawyers, meeting with Army investigators today. Of course, there was a swap of 5 key Taliban in Afghanistan to bring back Bo Bergdahl. Is it conceivable that any of those Taliban 5 had some sort of hand in this, or is that too great a stretch, Bob?
Oh, I would certainly believe they had a hand in it, because, we use this. There's a non-polygraph technology that I delve into in my book in a great deal. Before Clapper signed his memo in 2009, it was one of 3 memos DOD officials had to sign before they could finally get rid of this non-polygraph technology, because the troops on the ground wouldn't quit using it. We use this non-polygraph technology at Gitmo. We used it to interrogate Saddam Hussein's deck of cards after polygraph failed. I interviewed a Green Beret just a few days after he retired.
And imagine if we could have used that technology on the Taliban 5. Only 1 minute remains. Go ahead, Bob.
I interviewed this Green Beret. He used this other technology on over 500 occasions, including Taliban and Al-Qaeda. He broke up theft rings. He broke up attacks.
And Bob, we will have to bring you back to talk more specifically about that technology. Of course, we can read about it in your book. We look forward to doing that as you hold up the book right there. And we discussed it earlier. The Clapper Memo is the name of the book. To Bob McCarty and to Major General Paul Vatterly. Gentlemen, our thanks to you both. We will obviously be talking in the days ahead on this very vexing problem and the promising technology that Bob just mentioned. Well, still to come, more than 1 billion passwords and usernames stolen, and a familiar foe believed to be behind this breach. We will have that story when we come back. There is more straight ahead on America's Forum.